Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
Dental office schedules and scheduling procedures are not what they used to be. And before I sound like a crotchety old guy sitting on his porch who tells you to get out of his yard, let me explain. When I entered the industry in the early 1990s, most doctors I spoke with had a concept of what their schedule should look like, including blocking time for specific procedures, separating procedures by doctor and assistant time, focusing on quadrant dentistry, having an assistant in each room, committing the mornings to primary high-dollar procedures. I could go on with this. There were a lot of different components. Now, not all of them were able to pull it off, but most at least had an idea of what should be happening to run an efficient schedule. And keep in mind, these offices, most of them at least, hand-billed insurance, took film or conventional x-rays that had to be developed, and at least 80, if not 90% of them were running off of analog, like a hard appointment book that you used to have to use a pencil to write in. They weren't using their software because it didn't really accommodate it. Now, we're in an era where digitization gives us the potential for incredible efficiency. Digital x-rays, cone beam scans, and dental software that makes scheduling and insurance billing a matter of just a few keystrokes. In other words, the procedures people used to do with regards to scheduling and other office functions is far easier today with all the tools you have at your disposal. And yet, some of these finer arts that everyone knew, including scheduling, effective confirmation procedures, and sensible patient billing, seem to have been more or less forgotten, even though it is easier. And the more I see, especially with newer clients and younger owners, the more I wonder what happened. Losing these systems have cost these offices hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost production and revenue per year, created a ton of unnecessary stress, and potentially keep the office in a state of false busyness due to a lack of planning and systems. I'll give you an example. I was in a newer client's office not all that long ago, and I saw everyone running around. The office looked busy. When I checked production for the day, it was below average, and the patients were subjected, on average, many of them at least, to a 15 to 20-minute wait. In other words, their appointment was at 2, and they weren't being seated till 2:15, 2:20. So what was the root of this? Well, the scheduling system, and I'm using quotation fingers for the word system, was non-existent. It was literally fill the opening with something and hope it was productive. Had a lot of no-shows and last-minute cancellations, and to cap things off, there was no system or policy on how long things actually took, how long procedures actually took. So the front desk would rely on the doctor giving them the amount of time needed, which was usually incorrect, and the office would run over a half hour on most procedures, was usually double or triple booked, and of course the doc had no time to really spend with patients to explain comprehensive treatment. At the end of the day, I sat with the doc and the OM and I jokingly asked if they hated themselves because they were willingly creating a stressful environment for themselves. And this example is by no means unique. I've seen this way too much, and like these other issues, confirmation and patient billing, it seems we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to scheduling. So how do you put order into your office schedule and create an efficient, productive, and pleasant working environment? Well, it's not all that hard, but it does take some work. And I covered a lot of it in episodes 49 and 50, which was how to design the ideal schedule for your practice. If you really want to get a handle on this, you could listen to those episodes. If you really want to get a handle on this is my shameless plug moment, folks. I'd suggest a couple of things. You can check out the free MGE virtual. It's a virtual event. It's a seminar. It's about 3-4 hours long. We do it for free, called The Art of Scheduling Productively. There's no obligation. You can attend it for free. I'll put a link to it on the episode webpage. Or for even more comprehensive information, you can go to our online platform, DDS Success. And there's 2 courses I would recommend. There's one called The Art of Scheduling, which is for the entire practice. It teaches everybody how the schedule's supposed to run, gives you the whole theory and the system. And then there's actual schedule coordinator positional training, which gives you all the ins and outs of running an efficient schedule. And DDS Success is a subscription-based service. There's no contracts. You can order or cancel anytime. It's normally $289 a month, and that includes you and up to 10 staff. What we do for Dental Business RX listeners is we give you this code RX269, and you can save $20 a month if you want to check it out. Anyway, there's all my shameless plugs. So with all of this said, though, what are some of the big picture steps you could take right now, immediately after listening to this episode, to start putting order into your practice, make it more productive and more efficient? Well, that's what I want to talk about in this week's episode. We'll be covering 5 simple steps to fix your schedule and improve production. My name is Jeff Blumberg, and I'm your host. And I say we just jump right into it, because I already spent enough time on the introduction. So what's our first step? So step 1 of 5 is your schedule should run on 10-minute intervals. In other words, a 10-minute book. Now, I survey this from time to time with clients when we're doing various seminars, and it still seems that about 30% of people are on a 15-minute book. And you might wonder, well, what's the big deal whether I'm on 15 minutes or 10 minutes? Well, let me give you a couple of examples. Let's say, if you look at how long an adult prophy actually takes, let's say it actually takes about 50 minutes in your practice, to get the patient seated, do the bite wings or whatever diagnostics you like to do, probing, and for the doc to come in and do a quick recall exam and get the patient's teeth cleaned. So let's say that takes 50 minutes. If you have a 15-minute book, you cannot schedule anything for 50 minutes. You can't schedule anything for 40 minutes because you can either schedule it for 45 or an hour. So if you were to do, let's say you had 50-minute recall appointments, in theory, within 5 appointments, you could actually add a 6th, where if they were all 1 hour, you've only done 5. So in 5 hours, you can do 5 one-hour appointments or 6 50-minute appointments. So that's one thing. The other thing is, if you're splitting procedures by doctor and assistant time, which I'll talk about here in a little bit, if you are running off of a 15-minute book, you actually can waste up to about an hour a day of just, where you're not getting things done that you should be getting done, okay? So the 10-minute book is more accurately reflective of what you could be doing in the practice. That's the first thing. Point number 2 is you want to make sure that you are properly utilizing your dental assistants. So there's a couple aspects to this. First aspect is, in your Dental Practice Act for your state or province, it will be very clearly outlined what a dental assistant or auxiliary is permitted to do legally. And this does vary by state. Some states are more restrictive than others, so you want to make sure that you're following the letter of the law. Okay, you want to make sure you're not doing things that you're not supposed to, or having your assistant do things that they're not supposed to. But assistants are usually able to do quite a bit. So if you're doing things that your assistant legally could do, that's a problem. Now, let's say in your state it's legal for an assistant to make and seat a temporary restoration. Fine. But your assistant is not capable of making or seating a temporary restoration. Well, obviously, I wouldn't have them do it then. But then you should be training them to do it. Ideally, you want your assistants to be able to do, you want to max them out. Anything they are legally capable of doing, they should be doing, and you should not. You can look at this from a couple of different viewpoints, all right? But if anything, take a look at the overall value to the practice that the doctor has. And again, this is not personal value. I'm talking about straight production value. The doctor has more production value than a dental assistant or a hygienist or anybody else, okay? And I'm not saying that as a point of hubris for the doctor. I'm just saying that's a reality. That's a fact. So why would I want the doctor who's worth, several $100s per hour doing something that I could pay somebody $25 to $30 an hour to do? That makes no sense, just from a financial perspective when you're running the business. Now, so that's the first thing. You want to make sure assistants are maxed out. But then also, if you're double booking, which you should be if you're busy enough to do it. If you're a startup practice with 14 patients, you don't need to double book, okay? But if you're a normal general dental practice that's busy, you should be double booking. Well, technically, to double book, a few conditions have to be present, one of which is there has to be an assistant for each room you're double booking in. If I'm working out of 2 rooms with one dental assistant, we're basically just switching chairs from time to time, or we have a place for a patient to wait for a few minutes when we're not with the other patient in the other room. If I'm properly double booking, that means that I have an assistant in room. Let's say I'm working out of rooms 3 and 4. I have an assistant in room 3 and I have an assistant in room 4. And what they're doing when I'm not in that room is represented on the schedule, whether it's seating a patient or placing the temp and giving the patient their post-op instructions. Whatever that is represented on the schedule, and it keeps me moving room to room, doing things only a doctor can do. So you can't properly double book with one dental assistant. You need 2, and they should each be responsible for a room, and it keeps the doctor moving and productive room to room. And I'm going to get into a little bit more on this in this next point, but one thing I will say, if you're properly double booking, you can save 1/3 of the time you spend on your schedule, meaning that if what would take you 3 hours to do if you're properly double booked would take 2. Let that sink in again. If you're spending 3 hours doing something linearly booking, meaning you're seeing patient 1 from 10 to 12 and then the next one from 12 to 1, you could get that done in 2 hours if you were properly double booked. Unless, of course, I'm sure somebody's going to challenge me on this. If it's all root canals, maybe not, okay? But if it's standard, regular old dental procedures where you're bouncing back and forth or whatever, whether it's crowns or veneers or something like this, if you're or even fillings, if you're properly double booking, you can get more done, far more done, at least, 33% more done in the same amount of time. Which brings us to the next point, which is how you represent things on your schedule, meaning that if your procedures should be represented as doctor and assistant time. So this system's been around for a long time, even when we had paper books. But, you'd represent doctor time as an X or a dot, and you'd represent assistant time as a slash or an O on the schedule. And if you look at an old school appointment book, and this is represented in your software, by the way, what your software will use one symbol for the doctor and one symbol for the assistant. It's not that difficult to see. That's why I say with softwares, it's even far easier now. But it used to be when you had an analog appointment book, it would have that little column in the center between the two chairs, and you'd have, you couldn't put two X's next to each other because those were the doctor. There had to be an X, and in the next chair, there had to be either a slash or an O or whatever symbol you use for the assistant. The doctor can't be in more than one place at the same time. If you want to properly double book, you have to sit down and figure out how long procedures actually take, number one, realistically. So you're not trying to squeeze an hour and a half procedure into an hour because that's not going to turn out well for anybody. But also you want to figure out of those procedures, how much is doctor time and how much is assistant time. Like, for example, let's say you use slashes, like a backslash to represent assistant time and an X to represent the doctor. So you take a procedure like a single unit crown, might be slash XXX slash. First 10 minutes of the appointment is the assistant, next 30 is the doctor. The doctor might pop in there and give the patient a shot and leave the room. But first 10 minutes are the assistant, getting the patient seated, getting them ready, etc. Then the doctor's in there for 30 minutes doing the prep. And then for the last 10, the assistant's placing the temp and giving them any post-op instructions or, making sure they get scheduled for their next appointment and things like this. Okay? So that's how you'd represent it on the schedule. Now, the funny thing is, and this is hard to do on a podcast, but during that slash, while the assistant's dismissing the patient and wrapping up and placing their temp, the doctor can be in another room with the patient that the next assistant has just seated, or gotten ready for the doc. That's the whole idea of double booking. So in order to properly double book, not only do you need the two assistants, but you also need some idea of how long things take, and it has to be represented as doctor and assistant time. Now, I would give you 3 pieces of advice if you really want to tackle this. Obviously, we get all into this in these other courses I mentioned. That's my second shameless plug. Sorry, folks. I'll put those links on the episode webpage. But three basic pieces of advice. First one is, if you want to do this, where you start figuring out how long procedures take, is start with the procedures that you do the most of on the doctor's schedule. Don't start with procedures you never do. Eventually, you can figure that out, but start with procedures you normally do. Crown deliveries, onlay preps, inlay preps, etc. Things you do a lot of. Composites, whatever it is, implants, things you do a lot of. Figure out, A, how long does that take from when the patient is seated in the chair to when they're actually dismissed, number one. And number 2, then determine how much of that is doctor time and how much of that is assistant time. And if you want, you can have a little card outside the chair, or somebody keeps at the front where they actually log when the patient went back, and you guys can kind of reverse engineer it, figuring out how much is assistant, how much is doctor time. That's the first thing. Is figure out how long these things actually take. And then the other thing about this, though, that I will add is when you start making policy on this, let's say a crown prep is, slash for assistant time, XXX, 30 minutes of doctor time, and slash for 10 minutes of assistant time. So 50 minutes, 50 minutes. When I write a policy on this, because I want my scheduler to just run with this stuff and me not to have to tell the scheduler how long I need for a procedure every single time, okay, I would probably add a little bit of extra time into the appointment just to be safe. Let me explain. So if my crown appointment, again, I know this is tough on a podcast, is slash XXX slash, I would probably write the policy where it was slash XXXX slash. I'm adding an extra 10 minutes of doctor time. Now, why? Well, number one, that doesn't put me under the gun to have to hustle with every patient that I get back in the chair. Number two, some patients are easier to handle than others. Maybe somebody has trouble getting numb. This accounts for that with that extra 10 minutes I have built into the schedule. Number three, you're probably doing recall exams throughout all of this. Now, with a new patient exam, I would represent the doctor time on the schedule, 2 X's, wherever that new patient exam is. Let's say the new patient is scheduled in hygiene, and you're going to go in and do a 20-minute initial oral exam when that time comes during the appointment, maybe towards the end of the appointment. Those 2 X's should be in that column to represent that you were unavailable while you're doing that new patient exam. But for a recall exam, those take 2 to 5 minutes, and you might even have 2 hygienists going. If you build a little bit of extra fat into every procedure on the doctor's schedule, you can do those recall exams in that 2 to 5 minutes without having to actually represent it on the schedule. It's very easy. The other aspect of it is with a recall exam, you don't necessarily have to wait till the end of the appointment to see the patient because you've already seen this patient. Whereas with a new patient, you're going to want to make sure you have all your diagnostics and stuff before you walk in the room. All right. And then the second thing, I noticed I mentioned there were 3 things here you're going to want to do, is when you write your policy on how long things take, right? So we're starting with stuff we do all the time. We're building a little bit of fat in. Okay, that's number 1. It was actually 2 things, but we're calling that thing number 1 here. The second thing you're going to want to do is you may even have it where, like, let's say you're doing a quadrant of crowns. Well, you don't need a whole other 30 minutes for that one additional crown. You might only need 10 or 20. So when you write your scheduling policy, you can just note that in there. If I'm doing this procedure, a crown, it would be slash 4 X's and a slash, and add an additional X for every additional crown or something like this. And then lastly, you would make these your default scheduling policy. So when you have a scheduler up at the front, they're using your software to schedule your patients. If they don't hear differently, this is what how they're scheduling everybody. So if I come into your practice and your policy is single unit crown is slash XXXX, 4 X's and a slash, then you see me, you send me up front. You don't have to write anything down other than, as far as how long you want to see me, because you already have policy on it. Your scheduler knows how to schedule me and where to put me in the book. Whereas there's something peculiar about my case and you want to add time, you can note that before I go up to the front so that the scheduler knows to modify the schedule. So you would have sort of default times built into your scheduling policy. All right, so that's number 3 as far as making sure that you actually break down doc and assistant time. This is usually when you're implementing the scheduling system what takes the longest to do. Point 4 is I would block time in your schedule for productive or what we call primary procedures. So normally in the system we teach, we break procedures into 3 tiers. There's primary, secondary, tertiary. Primary are high dollar procedures, which most people think, oh, well, that's crowns and implants and whatever. It could also be if you're doing 14 composites, that's a high value procedure. You might want to set up what that means in your practice. So you have primary procedures. Secondary procedures are lower value procedures, a couple fillings, things of that nature. And then there's tertiary, which are no charge appointments. All right. And obviously, there are a couple modifiers with some tertiary appointments, like a consult appointment is tertiary, but there might be different rules on how you schedule it. Either way, you want to block time in your schedule for these high value or primary procedures. Now, my suggestion, and again, this is how it was always done or the way people do it, is block out your mornings for this. Block out your mornings. And there's a reason for this. This is your office and your schedule. You don't want to just run in there and do whatever you have to do to pay the bills. That's not why you're there. You're there to get something done, to help people. So you have to have it being done to some degree on your terms. This is when you want to do this. This is how you want your office to run. And I could go off on this for a while, but I don't know how many clients I've seen come in here working 5-6 days a week, and they're working evenings and, Saturdays because that's what patients want. But then you teach them how to control their schedule, and now they're working 4 days a week from 8 to 4 because it can work, I guess is my point. You have to be able to live with whatever you're setting up, and you also have to be happy. An unhappy doctor does not make a good office. So you have to figure out what's best for the office, your patients, and yourself here. The reason why I like production first thing in the morning is it anchors the day. Like the morning is dedicated to primary high-value procedures. It anchors the day. You've made your production goal by lunch, as well as if you're doing a surgical procedure. I mean, normally you wouldn't do a bunch of extractions at 5 in the evening. Why not? In most cases, you don't want to be getting the call at 10 o'clock at night that something went wrong. You'd want to get that call at 2 in the afternoon because you've already seen this patient. So you make your production goal. It's best for the patient. It's best for the practice. it just makes life easy. That's what I would suggest. Do your primary in the morning. Some guys like to do primary 3 mornings a week and then flip it for the 4th one. They'll do it in the afternoon just to be nice or whatever to accommodate some patients. But the whole point is you want to make it makes your goal by lunch, and then that pressure is off for the day. Now, the biggest problem usually implementing this is how do you get patients to buy into it or follow along? It's actually a lot easier than you think. So my first suggestion would be when you're presenting a treatment plan to a patient and they accept, you might want to just bring up the schedule right then and there. Hey, this is a surgical procedure, might be 4 crowns, which, okay, maybe you're not opening up their gums, but there is going to possibly be some bleeding and they're going to need to be numbed up or whatever. However you want to describe it to the patient, that's real to you. Like, you're smart. You'll figure this one out as far as how you want to describe it, but it is an involved procedure. So you might say, hey, this is a surgical procedure. I do these in the morning. And you might even ask your treatment coordinator, when's my next one available? Day after tomorrow at 9. Can you be here day after tomorrow at 9? The patient is going to be very comfortable listening to the doctor. They're most apt to listen to the doctors. That's the first thing. The doctor can kind of push that right from the get-go. If the doctor is not available to do this, or it's a patient of record calling to do some treatment, your scheduler just can easily respond with, oh, the doctor only does these procedures in the morning. It's our office policy. In most cases, that shuts down 90% of the complaints, or the pushback. Yeah, we only do these procedures in the morning. It's the office policy. For some reason, I don't know why, but it just does. But that way you can actually have your production in the morning, which is where you want it to be. But again, maybe you don't. Maybe you want to do it differently. That's up to you. You're a night owl. You like doing it at night. Up to you. But that's my suggestion, because then you've met your goal by lunch. All right. And you could also apply this to other things as well. You could block out new patient time, but minimally, let's at least start blocking time for production. Which brings us to our last point here. You need to schedule time to sell. And this is a big error if you don't. I've talked about this. If you've listened to podcasts for a while, you've heard this before. In dentistry, we schedule time for diagnosis and we schedule time for treatment. We don't schedule time for selling. But if you think about this logically for a second, if you diagnose that I need 4 root canals and 6 crowns, and we've built time in for an exam on your schedule, how are you going to bridge that diagnosis into you actually doing those 4 root canals and 6 crowns on me? That's sales. So there has to be time baked in order to do that. Because even, let's take a treatment plan like that. That's a $10,000+ treatment plan. That's going to take some time to sit down with me and explain. So in most cases, what tends to happen is the doctor tries to force it, or they have one of the staff talk to the patient. And the doctor, meaning by force it, meaning the doctor spends 5 minutes explaining it to me before they have to go in with the next patient. That's not adequate time to make me feel comfortable and answer all of my questions and for you really to do a great job from a treatment presentation perspective. So let's look at how this would roll out. Ideally, you would present same day. But if you only have 5 minutes to explain an expensive case, and expensive is relative, we have to remember that. For some people, 5, 6, 3, that's a lot of money. So I wouldn't necessarily dismiss that fact. If someone makes $40,000 a year and you're asking them for $5,000, you're asking them for over a month's salary. So you need some time to do that. It might take 15, 20 minutes to do it properly. Ideally, we do that the same day that we diagnose it. We see the patient, we diagnose the treatment, you explain the treatment. But let's say you're in seeing this patient and your next patient is already numbed to start 2 root canals. You don't have 15, 20, 30 minutes to explain it to this patient. Well, this is where you want to have time built into the schedule for treatment presentations. You might bring them back the next morning or the next afternoon or later that day. I know it's not necessarily convenient, but there's easy ways to explain this. I've talked about this at length before, but this is where you bake time into your schedule for consultations. We just call it consult time. Now, where would we put this consult time? And these are for people we can't present to same day. We do it first thing in the morning, and we do it first thing after lunch. Now, why? If we do it first thing in the morning, let's say you start your day with 30 to 40 minutes of consult time, and you roll right into primary time where you're doing larger procedures till lunch. Well, if you do your consults first thing in the morning, what happens if, let's say, you're done with you start at 8 o'clock, and you're done with all your consults by 8:40, and you've seen 2 patients in that time, one for each for 20 minutes. Let's say your 8:40 productive procedure had to cancel last minute. Well, there's always a possibility that one of the 2 patients you just saw for a consultation could stay. So roll out your day for a second. You walk in at 7:30, you find out that your big productive procedure at 8:40 had to cancel. They had a family emergency. They had to leave town. Well, you've got 2 consultations, one at 8 o'clock and one at 8:20. So when you finish with the 8 o'clock patient and they want to do the treatment plan, you might say, hey, as a matter of fact, I just had a last-minute opening. I could start this, right now. Do you want to get going? And they go, sure, I'm off today. You send them off for financial arrangements. They get done, and then you're in a chair at 8:40 and you're doing those preps. Saves your day. That's the reason I like them first thing in the morning. First thing after lunch I like, in case you end up working through lunch, you can see a patient for a consultation right after your lunchtime. You can also always squeeze them in at various times. Maybe somebody can't come in at those 2 times and you don't want to wait too long. Because again, if it's a new patient or a patient of record and you have treatment to discuss with them, you want to get them back as soon as possible. And I've broken this down a ton of times on different episodes. I know that's being very general, folks. But if you've been listening for a while, you've heard me talk about this stuff before. But I would block that time out. So the basic concept would be, if I can present same day, I will. If I can't, I've got consult time blocked out in my schedule to where I can bring people back. So new patient exam, you go in and you do it. It's 15 minutes. You only have 5 minutes. It's a larger case. Bring them back the next day for a consultation. Patient of record even. You recommended 4 inlays last time they were in. You look, they still need the 4 inlays, maybe a little bit more. You don't have time to get into it with them today. You say, hey, listen, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to review all the diagnostics I have today, the x-rays, the scans, whatever. And we're going to take a look at what the appropriate method of treatment here would be to take care of all these problems with you. I want to take some time, look it over, study it, etc. I'd like to get you back for a consultation where it's just me and you. I can do one. When's my next appointment available? You might ask your treatment coordinator or hygienist. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., doctor. Could you be here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.? And the patient may push, well, can't you just tell me today? You know what? Just give me some time. I want to make sure I figure out what's best for you. And you might even ask them at that point if anybody else makes healthcare decisions, like a significant other's involved, in which case you can have them there as well. Bottom line is, again, present same day if you can. If you can't, bring them back for a consultation. And again, there's a number of different ways you could do this, but that I recommend first thing in the morning, first thing after lunch, at least as a point to start with, and you can always squeeze them in around on the schedule. All right, so that was the 5th thing. There you have it. It's not the whole system by any means, not even close. But if you were to just do what I was talking about in this episode, it can pay amazing long-term dividends, and it also puts control and order into your schedule with improved patient service, eliminated wait times, increased revenues, and less stress for you and your team. And like I said, if you want to learn the system more in depth, you can check out that free seminar. I have a link on the episode webpage. You can also check out DDS Success. Remember, the coupon code is RX269, and watch those courses. Again, one of the courses called the Art of Scheduling is for your whole team. And then there's the Schedule Coordinator training, which is more specialized scheduler training. I do hope this helps. If you have any questions about this, you can always email me at jeffb@mgeonline.com. You can also find us online at mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. Folks, have a great week, and we'll see you at the next episode.